he gonna be here today? No.
I don't know. And he told me yesterday he was, but who knows?
I saw him earlier, not early, yesterday.
Yeah. ADHD research shows that children taking amphetamine therapy for ADHD in the long term have an increased risk of alcohol and drug abuse as adults. Something that you need to worry about if you have a child with ADHD. The reservations are notorious for having large percentages of their children taking ADHD drugs, Ritalin and Strattera, Cylert.
And does that have to do with drug abuse?
Probably not. It probably has more to do with misdiagnosis. Misdiagnosis, a lot of times the culture is so completely different that Western medicine diagnoses them because they don't pay attention and they don't look at the teacher. And if they don't look at the teacher thinks that they're not paying attention. If they're not paying attention, they assume that they have attention deficit disorder. That's a problem. Half the children with ADHD have comorbid ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. If left untreated, these individuals are more likely to progress to more serious problems like stealing, vandalism, and arson. These are the kids that really have ADHD. We've seen lots of things that look like ADHD, and of course, because doctors are lazy and because they want to do things as rapidly as possible, if somebody comes in and they're told that they have ADHD, they just treat them. They're not really working them up, which is what they actually should do. So a lot of kids, well, we said that last time, 75% of children, only 75% of children actually respond to these medications. That means 25% don't. That's a lot of kids.
Yeah.
That's a lot of kids, and most of those kids have other problems besides ADHD. They don't have ADHD. They just have other problems that look like ADHD. That's a problem. Diet pills, one of the main uses for amphetamines, of course, in the 20th century is as diet pills. But every time a new drug hits the market, it seemed to cause its own set of problems. Fen-phen, of course, they put them together. It was fenfluramine and phentermine. They marketed them together as Fen-phen. The problem was that they were two amphetamines. They weren't very strong amphetamines, but they affected the select heart valves of some women, not all women. It was outlawed in 1999. My wife took this for about 6 weeks. Lost a ton of weight. Well, she lost what she was trying to lose.
Yeah.
It really works. It really worked, but we were afraid, of course, that it might do damage to her heart. So.
And that was like the side effects was heart condition?
Yeah, it was a heart condition. Most women, of course, they don't have any valve problems. They don't have any heart problems. So those women could take it, but there were a lot of women, not a lot of women. There were a number of women that died from heart valve problems.
I haven't seen, in our clinic, I haven't seen any diet pills. They don't do that anymore? No.
They try not to do that anymore. Yeah. Only with select individuals, only with individuals who are morbidly obese will they give them amphetamines. Lots of other ways to do it. You know, the stomach stapling is one way to do it, one way to force people to lose weight. There are other things that they can do. They can go on Weight Watchers or...
What is that thing where they take out a piece of your stomach so you eat less? Is that gastro?
That is stomach stapling, I think.
Is it gastro?
Gastro... yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I forgot the name of it.
Yeah.
That's what it is though, right?
Yeah. Stimulants are and have been used all over the world for centuries. Khat is used in the Middle East. Betel nuts are used in the Far East and Asia. Yohimbe is used in Africa, and Ephedra is used in the Mediterranean area. Khat, that's what it looks like. It's got to be fresh or it's no good. It's a mild stimulant found in the Middle East. This is the stuff that the Egyptian truck drivers were on when they were running through our camp. Smuggling of the drug in the United States has become more prevalent as more and more immigrants from the area come into the United States. The key stimulant in the leaf is cathinone, which evaporates if the leaf isn't used within 48 hours after it is harvested. This substance is said to produce an effect between caffeine and methamphetamines. Methcathinone is a synthetic version of cathinone, and that's a really serious problem in Russia.
Is it still being produced?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah, this stuff's real popular, like all over that Eastern Africa. Eastern Africa and the Middle East. The drug is used extensively in the Horn of Africa and on the Arabian Peninsula. In Yemen, half the population uses khat, and a family may spend 1/3 of their income on the drug. This drug is the driving force of the economies of many of the countries in the area. The drug is used socially. Chronic khat use can cause physical exhaustion, suicidal depression when withdrawn, and of course that's the biggest problem. And so they just continue to use.
Yeah.
It has this really strange suicidal property. And for some reason, and nobody's exactly sure why.
Do they eat it, or how do
They
how
chew
is
it. They chew
Oh.
it. Yeah, like coca leaves.
Okay.
Yeah, they just chew the plant. Synthetic cathinone is known as methcathinone. While this is only found sparingly in the United States, it is much more common in Europe and in fact represents 20% of the illicit drug use in the Russian Republic. Methcathinone is much more intense than khat and is as additive as addictive, as methcathinone. With this drug, there is more dopamine reduction, and so Parkinsonism is more common with methcathinone. And of course, this is one of the things we see in Russia. Betel nuts, this is the stuff that I ran into in Vietnam.
Betel nut?
Betel nuts come from the betel nut palm and are found all over southern Asia. It is used extensively in India, Pakistan, the Arab world, Taiwan, Malaysia, the Philippines, New Guinea, Polynesia, southern China, and Africa. Worldwide, 200 to 450 million people use betel nuts. There's some of your friends. In Taiwan, this is goofy. In Taiwan, 70% of men and 1% of women use the substance. This is in Taiwan. One recent controversy in Taiwan is the betel nut beauties, who man betel nut kiosks while dressed provocatively to attract male customers. Weird, weird stuff. Some authorities are demanding more modesty for fear of compromising public morals. It's almost like as bad as prostitution. It is just bizarre. These women wear almost nothing. I gave you one that wasn't quite as provocative as it potentially could be. But as you can imagine, they're wearing lingerie and getting men to stop.
Did you run into one of the kiosks?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh no,
No.
I've never been on Taiwan.
Okay.
This is Taiwan.
Okay.
In Vietnam, everybody chews this stuff.
Okay.
It's really attractive too, because then their teeth turn black.
Yeah.
That's really pretty. The active ingredient in betel nuts is ericoline, which induces an increase of epinephrine and norepinephrine in the central nervous system. This causes a mild euphoria, excitation, and a decrease of fatigue. The juice of the nut is dark red, and it stains the mouth red to black, as attractive as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they have lipstick on all the time.
Yeah.
But if they have cracks in their lips, as you can see,
Yeah.
it gets darker around the cracks.
Yeah.
Okay. Ericoline and muscarine are fairly toxic and cause mouth and esophagus irritation that might lead to cancer in the area. 7% of chronic users develop a cancer. In India, betel nuts are mixed with sweetened tobacco to make a product known as gutkhā. as goofy as that is. Yohimbine is the extract from the yohimbe tree found in Africa. The tree is a member of the coffee family, and the extract is bitter and spicy and often brewed in a similar manner as coffee. The active ingredient in yohimbine is alpha-2 adrenergic antagonist that increases the neurotransmitter norepinephrine again. Yohimbine has been used for centuries as a mild aphrodisiac and a sexual rejuvenator. Yohimbine's sexual side effects seem to stem from its ability to increase penile blood flow. It has been used to treat erectile dysfunction and is reputed to induce sexual arousal in women, since sexual arousal in women is increased blood flow into the reproductive area. The drug does increase blood pressure and heart rate. Male enhancement products include Male Performance, Yohimbe Power, Men Power, and Aphrodine. I looked this up just before I came to class. There's a product at GNC called Yohimbe 451. It has 451 milligrams of Yohimbe powder in a capsule. It is also found in Sobi Energy. Yohimbine serves as a local anesthetic. In larger doses, it may produce a mild euphoria and sometimes hallucinations. At toxic levels, it can produce paralysis of the respiratory system and death. So there you go, Yohimbine. It's in Sobi Energy. So if you ever see Sobi Energy.
Sobi Energy. Is that a drink, right?
Yeah, that's a drink.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Sobi. Ephedra is a bush that grows in deserts all over the world. I see it when I'm running around the path around the campus. The drug that it produces is ephedrine. This drug is a mild to moderate stimulant that is used medicinally to treat asthma, narcolepsy, allergies, and low blood pressure. Once upon a time, of course, it was the major supplement used for people that were suffering from asthma. Ephedrine is also known as Marwith and Mahuang and has been used medicinally by the Chinese for 5,000 years. Ephedrine was first synthesized in 1885 and for decades was the only effective treatment for asthma. Ephedrine's effects are less severe than amphetamines, though a toxic level is more likely to lead to psychosis, which is not good. Ephedrine and pseudoephedrine are the active ingredients in many cold products, even though it only works on about 11% of the population. I know. So why is it in there? Because it's a stimulant, that's why it's in there. They also make up the molecule that is converted to make methamphetamine and methcathinone. This substance has also been implicated in sports doping scandals and so is banned by the NFL, and it's illegal in Ohio, ephedrine or any pseudoephedrine. So you can't take if you have a cold, you can't take a cold capsule before you play a sport in Ohio. The sale of cold remedies is now controlled to prevent the hoarding of enough of the substance to convert into the more destructive drugs. And of course, we've seen this over and over and over again. Caffeine is the most popular stimulant in the world. It's the most popular mood-altering drug in the world, and it's the most popular habit-forming drug in the world. 85% of the people in the United States consume substantial amounts of caffeine every day. Caffeine is naturally found in coffee, tea, and in chocolate. Caffeine is put in many products to give us energy. That's put in soda pop, energy drinks, and over-the-counter supplements like 5-Hour Energy. That's, yeah, okay. I've never tried that stuff. No, okay.
Me neither.
I don't know what it tastes like. Caffeine is really bitter, so I can imagine what the stuff tastes like. Water is the most widely consumed beverage in the world. However, tea is the second most widely consumed beverage, strangely enough. Tea has been consumed in China for 4,700 years. Tea has been ritualized in many cultures like Japan and China. The English discovered tea from the Portuguese traders. and the country became obsessed with tea, and they are nutty about tea. They put milk in their tea.
I tried it, it's good.
Okay, I don't like tea. Tea tastes like hay to me. I used to bale hay. I used to get that stuff with chaff in my nose,
Yeah,
in my mouth.
I
Yeah,
think I can, yeah.
yeah. So I can't
I like tea
drink it. It tastes too much like baling hay. To this day, at 4 o'clock is tea time in England, all over England. When everyone stops and takes a spot of tea, and that's England, as goofy as the place is. Coffee was first cultivated in Ethiopia, and of course it was tea that forced the English, or the English decided that they were going to start a war with China and force them to take opium and trade for tea.
Yeah.
Stupid as that is. Coffee was first cultivated in Ethiopia in 650 AD, and from there slowly spread into Europe, though along the way many cultures banned it as an intoxicant. Coffee as an intoxicant. In the United States, each coffee drinker consumes an average of 20 pounds of coffee a year. 8 ounces of brewed coffee will deliver about 135 milligrams of caffeine. 8 ounces of instant coffee will deliver 95 milligrams of caffeine. 8 ounces of decaf coffee will still deliver about 7 milligrams of caffeine. Archaeological evidence indicates that indigenous people in Central America brewed coca products as early as 2,600 years ago. So you guys were consuming, well, not the Navajo, of course, you guys were probably up farther up north. But they were consuming this stuff, and they didn't put sugar in with it, so it was really bitter.
Yeah.
But it still delivered quite a kick of caffeine. From the Mayans, this practice spread to the rest of South and Central America. The power brokers there, the Aztecs and the Incans, were big coca consumers. Coca was originally marketed in Europe as an aphrodisiac, but soon became merely candy. But it's still, well, tomorrow is Valentine's Day, and it still carries that concept of it being an aphrodisiac. Why in the world would you give somebody chocolate?
Yeah.
Okay, now here's the bizarre part. Chocolate works on women, but it doesn't work on men. As strange as that is. Like men need another aphrodisiac, something is an aphrodisiac. But that's one of the reasons why it is customary to give chocolate for Valentine's Day, because once upon a time it was considered an aphrodisiac. Coca has a small amount of caffeine, but other ingredients, active ingredients in the substance, act as stimulants as well. One of them is theobromine. And I tried to look this up. I was really interested, and I keep reading about women being more sensitive to chocolate than men are. So what is it in chocolate that makes women think that they're in love? And actually it is a feeling of love, and we're not exactly sure what it is. Theobromine is one of the things, and caffeine is the other, but we're not exactly sure why women react to it and men don't. But they do. They think they're in love. It's one of the reasons why when somebody breaks up with somebody, they start consuming chocolate. It makes them feel loved, as not as strange as that may seem. In the late 19th and early 20th century, manufacturers of cola soft drinks replaced cocaine with caffeine as an energy booster. Some of the caffeine comes from the cola nut from the African cola tree, but most of it today comes from caffeine removed from decaffeinated coffee. That's where the caffeine comes from. And there's a lot of caffeine out there. Energy drinks began with the invention of Red Bull in 1987. So the first energy drink wasn't created until 1987. And even in 1987, it was just a European drink. Red Bull is out of Switzerland. It's not out, it's not all over, it wasn't all over the world. Then all of a sudden it just kind of took off.
Yeah.
So we're not talking until the 1990s that people started consuming energy drinks. Red Bull delivers 80 milligrams of caffeine in an 8.3 ounce can Remember that 8 ounces of coffee delivers 135 milligrams. Red Bull also contains taurine, ginseng, guarana, glucose, B-complex vitamins, minerals, and carbohydrates, so you could live off of Red Bull. It's got B-complex vitamins in it.
Yeah.
8 ounces of brewed coffee, of course, delivers 135 milligrams. Soviet Adrenaline Rush also delivers 80 milligrams of caffeine in an 8.3 ounce can. Starbucks 2X shot delivers a whopping 105 milligrams of caffeine in just 6.5 ounce can. I don't drink coffee, so. 12 ounces of Mountain Dew delivers 54 milligrams of caffeine. 12 ounces of Dr. Pepper delivers 41 milligrams of caffeine. 12 ounces of Pepsi-Cola delivers 38 milligrams of caffeine. 12 ounces of Coca-Cola delivers 35 milligrams of caffeine. 16 ounces of Rockstar delivers 240 milligrams of caffeine. Is any of this stuff anything that you use yet?
I mean, I do drink soda, but like, maybe like once or twice a week, but not.
See, you need to drink it like all the time. 16 ounces of Full Throttle delivers 200 milligrams of caffeine. I see students drinking this stuff all the time.
Yeah, that's gross.
16 ounces of Monster delivers 160 milligrams of caffeine. 16 ounces of Mountain Dew Kickstart delivers 90 milligrams of caffeine. A new phenomenon that has hit the bar scene is to drink vodka mixed with Red Bull, and it's called Birch. So if you go to a bar and order Birch, they'll give you Red Bull and vodka. Now, the reason they do this is because people think that if they mix the two together, that it will slow the process of getting drunk, and it will result in less of a hangover the next morning. That's what they think. Doesn't work that way. They actually get drunk faster because the caffeine speeds the alcohol into the system. Deaths due to overconsumption of Red Bull have led to banning the drink in several countries. You can't find Red Bull in France, you can't find it in Denmark, and you can't find it in our neighboring country of Canada. They don't have any Red Bull. As weird as that is. Guarana is the national drink of Brazil. They tried to market it in the United States, so they call it Guarana Berry, if I remember correctly. It was a drink, let's see, when was that? It was right after my daughter graduated from college, in the 90s. So and it only lasted for a couple of years. It didn't taste very good. That was part of the problem. Anyway, it's a national drink of Brazil. Guarana comes from the guarana shrub, which produces beans that have 2 times the caffeine as coffee beans. The Brazilian drink normally delivers about 30 milligrams of caffeine in a 12-ounce can, so it's not that much. Actually, it's less than Mountain Dew, which is 54 milligrams per 12-ounce can.
Yeah.
Mate is a plant whose leaves are brewed like tea. Mate is a national drink of Argentina and delivers between 35 to 130 milligrams of caffeine per 8-ounce serving. I'm not really a Pope watcher. I do like Pope Francis. I think he's a better Pope than we've seen, well, than I've ever seen. But he's from Argentina. And from time to time, he'll be walking around the square and somebody will give him a mate. You know, it's the national drink of Argentina. And he's from Argentina. So 3% of the world's caffeine comes from mate. Not that that's all that much. Caffeine is a very bitter chemical. It's an alkaloid in a class of chemicals called xanthines. It is found in more than 60 plants around the world. The half-life of caffeine is 3 to 7 hours. It takes 15 to 35 hours for caffeine to clear the system. And this is the reason why people drink it. It stays in your system for a long time. It's a stimulant that stays in your system for a long time. So if you go to work in the morning and you drink caffeine, it probably won't clear your system until just before you're ready to go home from work. Swedes will average 425 milligrams of caffeine per day. 425. That's how many cups of coffee? 4, 3. It's 3 cups of coffee. And it's more than 3.5 cups of coffee. The English will average 445 milligrams of caffeine per day, most of it in tea. Americans only average 211 milligrams of caffeine a day, but we know where it comes from. 17% of it comes from tea, 16% is from soft drinks, 60% is from coffee. About half of all Americans will drink 3.3 cups of coffee a day. 20% of US adults consume more than 350 milligrams of caffeine per day. 3% of US adults drink more than 650 milligrams of caffeine per day. But there's a kicker to this. 65% of the 450 different soft drinks produced in the United States contain caffeine. But the reality is, I'm not sensitive to caffeine. Caffeine doesn't do anything to me. I could go off of it and I wouldn't have any withdrawal symptoms. Some people are very sensitive to it. My brother, my mother, they were both really sensitive to it. My brother, his daughter was married to a guy that was in the Navy, and they were stationed in Norfolk. And my brother lived in Muncie, Indiana. So he would go from Muncie to Norfolk, across Ohio, West Virginia, and into Virginia. It's about 600 miles. He would drive that every weekend so that his daughter didn't have to be alone, as stupid as that sounds. So one time, he's driving all by himself, and he was driving from Muncie to Norfolk, and he started to fall asleep, so he drank a Mountain Dew. 2 days later, he ended up in Maine. He woke up in Maine. He had a psychotic episode, I guess, but he blacked out while he was drinking, and he drove all the way through all the eastern corridor, through Baltimore, New York, and up through Boston into Maine, and he ended up in the middle of Maine 2 days later. And of course, somebody had to go get him because he was afraid he couldn't drive.
Yeah.
But he had a psychotic episode from drinking caffeine.
And he doesn't drink caffeine.
He doesn't
whatsoever.
drink coffee, he doesn't drink,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, so he can't now. And of course, he called me on the phone, he said, "You gotta be careful, don't drink any Mountain Dew because it's really dangerous." Well, geez, I drink, 2 or 3 cans of Mountain Dew a day. And of course, he can't drink any, and I can drink all that I want. I'm not sensitive to it. My mother, when she drank caffeine, or when she drank coffee, she loved coffee because it was free. And she grew up during the Depression. So when she went to work, she would drink coffee instead of drinking, or she drank water, but she wouldn't buy a Coke, because Cokes cost like 10 cents a bottle. Okay, so she was so cheap that she drank coffee all night long. Well, eventually she became so sensitive to it that later in life, when she was in her 70s and 80s, if she drank any coffee at all, she'd have heart palpitations. And it looked like a heart attack.
Yeah.
So they'd take her to the hospital and check her out and make sure she wasn't dying. She never did. Not of that, but she eventually died of old age. At 98, but she couldn't drink any coffee.
Anymore after that.
Yeah. Now here was the problem. This was the problem with my mother. If my dad left some coffee in the cup, she would drink it to get rid of it, because you never waste food, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then she'd have heart palpitations. As stupid as that is. So in order not to waste food, she would put her health in risk just to consume it so that it wouldn't go to waste. Isn't that stupid? That's what happens when you grow up during the Depression. Caffeine is used in several. She would eat food that she hated it,
Just so it doesn't go to
just
waste.
so it wouldn't go to waste.
And did she have like animals to give it to or anything? Like...
Yeah, we did, yeah. We always had pets. Caffeine is used in several prescriptions and over-the-counter medications, bronchodilators, decongestants, diuretics, analgesics, alertness aids, appetite suppressants, menstrual pain controllers. As a vasoconstrictor, it can work on migraine headaches. Caffeine works by inhibiting the effect of adenosine. Adenosine is a neuromodulator that depresses your mood, induces sleep, has anticonvulsant properties, causes low blood pressure, slows the heart rate, and dilates blood vessels. So if we look at caffeine, what caffeine does, it blocks adenosines. It blocks adenosine so that it's non-functional. And so it makes you happy, it awakens you, it makes you go into it makes you convulsant. It can, at high doses. It causes high blood pressure, it increases your heart rate, and it's a vasoconstrictor, so it constricts your blood vessels. Okay, but it's controlled by heredity. So my dad used to drink coffee by the bucket load, and he never had any effects from it. And I'm the same way. And my son is the same way, thank God, because he drinks coffee by the bucket load too.
Wow.
Starbucks, of course, has to be Starbucks. It's the only good coffee.
I like Dunkin' Donuts.
I don't know. I don't know if he's ever tried Dunkin' Donuts. To those sensitive to caffeine, he uses a French press.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's how he makes his.
Well, I don't really drink coffee that often, but like if I need it, I will have some. But
What does need?
like if I'm feeling like tired and like I'm driving somewhere and I need
Okay.
something.
And it works on you.
Yeah, it does.
So you're sensitive to caffeine.
Yeah, I am.
To those sensitive to caffeine, 350 milligrams per day may cause anxiety, insomnia, gastric irritation. Be careful. My wife drinks coffee because it makes her have bowel movements. As weird as that sounds. So she drinks it in the morning, and then you can time her. In 30 minutes, she'll have a bowel movement.
That's interesting.
I know, it's weird. So she has to be careful if she's driving someplace. She knows that if she drinks her coffee to wake up, that 30 minutes later, she better be around the bathroom because she'll have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Gastric irritation, high blood pressure, nervousness, and it flushes your face. One study where subjects were given 500 milligrams of caffeine showed a 32% elevation of the stress hormones for an extended period of time. Now we know that caffeine lasts in your system for 3 to 7 hours, so yes, it's going to raise your stress hormones. Caffeine is lethal at 10 grams, that's 100 cups of coffee, or 185 cans of Mountain Dew. I don't know if you could consume that much coffee or Mountain Dew.
In a day you have for that to happen?
I'm sorry?
In a day for that to happen?
No, how could you drink 100?
That's what I mean, but like
Yeah.
that much.
Yeah, you're not gonna kill yourself. But you can kill somebody with caffeine if you give them a shot of 10 grams of caffeine.
Wow.
In
Yeah.
susceptible people, too much caffeine can trigger nervousness. Caffeine is one of the substances that people prone to panic attacks should avoid because it causes anxiety. Counselors should ask their clients about their caffeine consumption, as sensitivity in excess amounts might create artificial anxiety. And of course, this can be a potential problem. We have seen this in people who are paranoid. Not individuals who have paranoid schizophrenia, but they are a problem as well. But individuals that show paranoid tendencies, we see lots of coffee consumption, really strong coffee consumption. So those wackos on the internet that are, I don't know if you heard about this, but they had a problem in Iowa with the caucus. They couldn't. They couldn't send in the results. One of the things that happened was they put the telephone number on this right-wing website, and all those guys kept calling up the number, and they were blocking anybody from getting through. Right-wing, paranoid, okay, that was part of the problem. That's one of the reasons that Iowa had so much trouble, was because these guys were blocking everything.
Yeah.
The app didn't work, and then they couldn't call in the results because the telephone number was busy constantly. My wife was the secretary, and she tried to call in her results. And they finished at like 8 o'clock, and so she started at 8 o'clock trying to call this thing in. And she went to bed, and they called her at 1:30 in the morning, the next morning, to get the results. She couldn't get through. Even when what it did, it put her on hold. And so she would just sit there on hold, and
Just waiting.
it wouldn't ring in. Sometimes it disconnected her, as weird as that is. Her telephone, you got a battery in your telephone. It went dead before she was able to get through, so she had to plug her telephone in. Stupid stuff. Okay, not important. We're talking about paranoid people, okay? Excess caffeine consumption can lower the fertility in women. 350 milligrams per day will not only make it less likely that a woman will get pregnant, but will double the chance of a miscarriage. And this is a problem with women that are pregnant. They need to stay away from caffeine for fear of miscarrying. Of course, when my daughter got pregnant, that was one of the things she wouldn't consume was caffeine. She felt like she had a fragile pregnancy anyway because she was so old, but she was afraid something would happen to the baby. Excessive caffeine consumption has also been implicated in a woman's developing benign lumps in her breasts. Researchers also feel that caffeine may make it difficult to lose weight because caffeine triggers the release of insulin, which metabolizes sugar and in turn creates a deficit in the blood, which causes hunger. So women who consume a lot of caffeine potentially will have a problem losing weight. Since there are a number of different hereditary structures that dictate sensitivity and tolerance to caffeine, talking about amounts and effects varies from one individual to another. High caffeine consumption may actually get sleepy. High caffeine consumers may actually get sleepy when only consuming small amounts of the substance because it activates the adenosine receptor sites. Withdrawal symptoms from caffeine begins after 12 to 24 hours of abstinence and peaks around 24 to 48 hours. The symptoms can last for 2 days to a week. Throbbing headaches, sleepiness, fatigue, lethargy, depression, decreased alertness, sleep problems, irritability, flu-like symptoms, nausea, vomiting, and muscle pains or stiffness. There you go, and that's caffeine. It is a stimulant, and it's the most popular stimulant in the world. Nicotine comes from the leaves of the tobacco plant. The tobacco plant is a member of the nightshade family, which also includes tomatoes, belladonna, henbane, and petunias. Now, all of these things can be poisonous if you consume too much of it, especially belladonna and henbane. In the United States, as a matter of fact, in the beginning, of course, tomatoes come from the Americas. They come from over here, especially North America. So when the Europeans first came over here, they realized it was a member of the nightshade family, and there was a rumor that tomatoes were poisonous. Mm-hmm. So people wouldn't eat them. Mm-hmm. And then, well, eventually, of course, they started eating them. But you can imagine the interaction between people, one side thinking that it's okay to eat them, and the other side going, oh no, it's poison. It's a member of the nightshade family. In the United States, 90% of tobacco is delivered to its users as cigarettes. In India, 85% of all men use tobacco in the form of chewing tobacco, as weird as that is. So in the United States, we smoke our tobacco. In India, they chew their tobacco. Tobacco came to the old world from the Americas, and it originally was smoked in pipes. In the 18th century, people began chewing the leaves and snorting the powder into their noses as snuff. And so we see snuff boxes, very fine powdered tobacco. And they would snort it up their nose, and then they would sneeze. And they said the sneeze was similar to an orgasm.
Oh,
okay.
That's why they did it.
That's why they did it. So they could have a nasal orgasm. Smokeless tobacco continued to be the most popular use of tobacco until World War I. There you go. Around World War I, packaged cigarettes became popular in the trenches of Europe. Why? Because cigars lasted too long and pipes Pipes glow and so do cigars, but if you smoke a cigarette, you can hold your hand over the lit end, and the probability of the enemy seeing it was not very high. And you could consume a cigarette fairly rapidly. This was possible because cigarette rolling machines improved. Cigarettes used a milder form of tobacco, which allowed deeper inhalation of the tobacco. They actually drew it down into their lungs. You can't do that with a pipe. You can't do that with a cigar. Mass production produced lower prices. Advertising popularized the product. More aggressive marketing brought the product around the world. Heavy smokers in the United States will smoke 20 to 40 cigarettes per day. U.S. tobacco users spend $89 billion a year on tobacco products. I don't want any necklaces, thank you very much. 24.9% of the population over 12, 60.5 million Americans smoked cigarettes in the past month. 51 million Americans smoke cigarettes every day. 13.6 million Americans smoke cigars every day. 2.2 million Americans smoke tobacco in pipes every day. 7.7 million Americans use smokeless tobacco every day. That's a lot of tobacco being consumed.
Yeah.
Smokeless tobacco comes in three forms: moist snuff that is put in the mouth next to the gums, powdered or dry snuff which is drawn up the nose, which isn't that popular in the United States, but it is in other places. Loose leaf chew, which is put in the mouth and chewed. Once upon a time, this was fairly popular. You could see chewing tobacco all over the place, but not so much anymore. Snuff, the moist snuff that you put in between your cheek and gums, that's real popular with cowboys, or people that want to be cowboys, or people that just want to look like cowboys. They'll have that snuff container in their pocket, and then they'll have that ring on their pocket, so it looks like they're snuff users or whatever. This is really popular up north on the Indian reservations, moist snuff, because they can consume it, and they can consume it in class. And so what would happen, I'd have 15 males in my class, and of those 15 males, 8 of them would be shooting snuff juice into a container, usually a clear bottle.
Or something.
Yeah, so you can see the nasty, ugly
Disgusting.
stuff. Ugh. Anyway, the active ingredient in tobacco is nicotine. Nicotine is a highly poisonous alkaloid that is bitter, smelly, and it's colorless. Tobacco leaves hold 2 to 5% nicotine. Smoking tobacco delivers nicotine to the brain in 5 to 8 seconds. Smokeless tobacco delivers nicotine to the brain in 3 to 8 minutes. Cigarettes contain 10 milligrams of nicotine, but a typical smoker will only get 1 to 3 milligrams into their system with one cigarette. 70 milligrams of nicotine is fatal. So you could kill somebody by injecting them with nicotine, 70 milligrams. But of course, you could do the same thing with caffeine, 10 grams, but that's actually a lot of caffeine. Chewing tobacco, yeah, I know, how are we gonna do it? Chewing tobacco will deliver 4.5 milligrams of nicotine to the brain with snuff, while snuff will deliver 3.5 milligrams of nicotine to the brain. The first cigarette of the day will raise the heart rate by 10 to 20 beats and the blood pressure by 5 to 10 units. Nicotine affects the central nervous system and disrupts the following neurotransmitters: endorphins, epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, and acetylcholine. Nicotine mimics acetylcholine, filling nicotinic acetylcholine receptor sites, exaggerating the cholinergic effects, increasing your heart rate, your blood pressure, your memory, your learning, your reflexes, aggression, sleep, sexual activity, and mental acuity. Okay, so why are we doing this? Well, look, we're raising our heart rate, we're raising our blood pressure, we're increasing our amount of memory with nicotine. We can learn more while we're consuming nicotine. Our reflexes become more acute, we become more aggressive, it keeps us awake, it allows us to have sexual activity, we are more sexually aware, and of course our mental acuity is increased as well. Dopamine makes a smoker feel satisfied and calm, thus a cigarette both excites and tranquilizes at the same time. As weird as that is. Now you know why people smoke so much tobacco. People continue to take in the tobacco toxins because it is a social ritual. There's also a ritual aspect to the lighting up and smoking. Smoking is perceived as an adult activity. It manipulates your mood, it makes you happier. It appears to be rebellious, it is sexually attractive. Women find men who smoke men who see women smoke, there's a possibility. Yeah, a smoker.
Yeah.
Okay. It controls your appetite, leading to weight loss, and of course nicotine is highly craved. Nicotine suppresses the appetite and increases metabolism. The average smoker weighs 6 to 9 pounds lighter than a same-sized non-smoker. It may be the fear of putting on weight that keeps some smokers from stopping. It's 6 to 9 pounds. Smokers may also be self-medicating to combat depression. Smokers are twice as likely as non-smokers to experience major depression. We see this with alcohol as well. People are using it as a self-medication. It makes them feel better. So if you smoke, then you feel good as long as you're taking in the nicotine, the dopamine, you're getting a dopamine rush. And the dopamine, of course, makes you feel good. Alcohol does the same thing. Alcohol will keep you from being depressed. So as long as you're drinking, then you're happy. As long as you're smoking, you're happy. Smokers who have experienced at least one major episode of depression are less likely to succeed in smoking cessation because they're using it as a self-medication. Nicotine creates an intense craving when a select level is not maintained in the bloodstream and the brain. The mere act of lighting up activates the nucleus accumbens, giving the smoker a sense of reward just from lighting the cigarette. We haven't even taken in a puff yet. But just from lighting it up, of course, it gives us this sense of that we're going to start feeling better in a matter of seconds. The rush is similar to the feeling that a heroin user gets when they relapse after an abstinent period. This use to escape withdrawal symptoms is called negative drug reinforcement. And unfortunately, it's very, very strong. Nicotine is the hardest substance to get over. We are addicted to this substance. Only 10% of people who try to stop smoking will be able to stop smoking. Only 10%. Only a few hours of smoking leads to neural adaptation to the toxicity of the nicotine. The first morning hit after a long night's sleep is said to feel especially rush-like as the individual builds the nicotine level back up to their daytime norm. Unlike other drugs, nicotine does not continue to build up a tolerance, but the smoker finds a level of comfort that they attempt to maintain. And that's one of the reasons why they go out and smoke every 2 or 3 hours, because they need to maintain a select level in their body, or they go through nicotine withdrawals. Now the withdrawals aren't really that strong, but they feel better if they have a select amount of nicotine in their system. So yeah, I guess they aren't that bad. Withdrawal from nicotine causes headaches, nervousness, fatigue, hunger, severe irritability, poor concentration, depression, increased appetite, sleep disturbances, intense nicotine cravings. If you've ever been around a smoker who's quitting, it's the irritability that it's there. You want to punch them in the face.
Yeah.
Okay, because they're so grouchy. The individual has experienced a true physiological dependence as the individual has created an excess number of nicotinic acetylcholine receptors that are screaming to be occupied. Without the nicotine to occupy these sites, the result is irritability and discontent. The smoker needs the tobacco to feel normal. This is normal for them. And when they're not smoking, they feel abnormal. Researchers now realize that the feelings of relaxation and well-being that smokers feel when they light up is actually the feeling of having the withdrawal symptoms subdued. So they continue to smoke. Nicotine addiction is a more powerful addiction than any other. While 23 million people have tried cocaine, only 600,000 people are weekly users and a rare few on a daily basis. 72 million people have tried marijuana, but only 6.8 million use on a weekly basis and only a fraction on a daily basis. 198 million people have tried alcohol, but only 48 million use it weekly and only 20 million on a daily basis. 162 million people have tried tobacco, 60 million people weekly, and 37 million smoke daily. Nearly 1/4 of the people who try tobacco continue to use the drug daily as compared to fractions with other drugs and 10% of people using alcohol. And that's why we say it is the most addictive substance known to man. You can use cocaine and stop, and that's no big deal. It turns out not to be a big deal. Marijuana, you can use it and stop. Alcohol, about 10% will try it and then they will continue to use it. But a full 1/4 of the people who start smoking continue smoking. 80% of smokers say they want to quit, 10% want to limit the amount they smoke. Only 10% of smokers want to continue, yet 100% do continue to smoke or chew. Other countries have more serious problems with tobacco than the United States. China's use is 50% higher than ours in the United States. England's use is 40% higher than the United States. Japan's use is also 50% higher than in the United States. Japan, you see a lot of people smoking.
What? Why is that though?
It's socially acceptable. Two of those are collectivist countries.
Yeah.
So if one person smokes, it's acceptable for anybody to smoke. In the United States, we're all individualistic. So when you decide to smoke, you smoke and I look at you and I go, he's a smoker.
Yeah.
But in China or Japan, when you see somebody smoking, you go, oh, now that's an acceptable, something acceptable to do. So they continue to smoke because, Charlie smokes, so it's okay to smoke.
Yeah.
Globally, 12% of women and 47% of men smoke globally. There may be a predilection to the use of tobacco. DRD2A1 allele is seen as the culprit. So there you go. We've got this gene that creates addiction in alcohol and tobacco and heroin. So anybody that has a DRD2A1 allele has this dopamine deficit, and so they need constant stimulation to feel normal.
Can you be tested for something like that?
DRD2A1, I'm not exactly sure. You would think that they could, but I'm not exactly sure if they do that kind of thing.
Then how do they know that is the addictive?
We've done studies, and what we've found is that when we have an addictive individual, they're more likely to have the DRD2A1 allele. People that are chronic users, they have the DRD2A1 allele. We've seen this over and over and over again. We've seen it with alcohol, with heroin, with tobacco. So yeah, is there a possibility that since there's alcoholism rate on the reservations is so high, that you guys have the DRD2A1 allele? Yeah, it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
But it isn't exclusive to the native population.
Okay.
Okay.
That's interesting.
It's kind of fascinating. A teen who smokes is 3 times more likely to abuse alcohol, 8 times more likely to abuse marijuana, 22 times more likely to abuse cocaine. Only 8% of black teens use tobacco. It's not popular in the black community. 15.7% of Hispanic teens use tobacco. It's not that popular in the Hispanic community. But 25.7% of white teens use tobacco. It's real popular in the white community. Nicotine contains 4,000 to 48,000 chemicals. 400 of them are toxins. 69 are known cancer-causing substances. Worldwide, it is estimated that smoking causes 5 million premature deaths per year. Is that all, just 5 million?
That's not bad.
Oh, no, that's not bad at all. 392,000 of these people are in the United States, 64,000 men, and 178,000 women. They die from lung cancer, heart disease, and lung disease. Lung disease is usually COPD that we're talking, emphysema, COPD.
Oh,
An additional 50,000 people die from secondhand smoke. 8.6 million Americans have at least one serious illness caused by smoking. 8.6 million. So you can imagine how much this is costing us. Tobacco.
okay. Yeah.
Now, for the longest time, of course, you don't remember this because you're too young, but for the longest time, tobacco advertisements on television, every other advertisement was for tobacco. And it was because we couldn't prove that tobacco was causing any health problems.
Yeah.
And the reason we couldn't is because there were lobbyists and there were tobacco executives that were paying scientists to say that tobacco didn't cause diseases. Despite the fact that one of the founders of the United States, Benjamin Rush, was a doctor, he said that tobacco was destructive, as was alcohol, and we needed to do something about it. Way back in the 18th century. Yet it wasn't until the middle of the 20th century, or at least three-quarters of the way through the 20th century, that we finally said tobacco causes health problems. And the reason is because of greed, because of money. So we would rather people died than the tobacco companies not make a lot of money. And in the tobacco producing areas of the United States today, you better be careful as to what you say about tobacco. If you say something negative about tobacco, people will get really angry with you.
Yeah.
My brother lives in South Carolina, which is a tobacco producing state. He smokes like a chimney, so does his wife smokes like a chimney. Don't ever say anything negative about tobacco to either one of them, because one of them she worked in tobacco manufacturing for a number of years. And as far as she's concerned, there's nothing wrong with tobacco. She would rather die from smoking tobacco than not smoke tobacco. It is estimated that a smoker loses 10 years off their life, and this is a study done in England. So if you smoke, you can expect to die 10 years sooner than you would have if you didn't smoke. Smoking accelerates the process of atherosclerosis by increasing low-density fats, by increasing blood coagulability. It makes your platelets sticky, and if your platelets are sticky, they're more likely to create a clot. This is in your bloodstream, somewhere in your bloodstream, and if it creates a clot in your capillaries, and all of a sudden that capillary is not functional. It triggers cardiac arrhythmias. It reduces micro-respiratory function by introducing carbon monoxide into the bloodstream. Carbon monoxide has a 230-time affinity for hemoglobin. So if you consume carbon monoxide in the form of cigarettes or just breathe in carbon monoxide, it will tie up your hemoglobin and then you die of asphyxiation. I told you the story about the chain smoker we had that worked in the laboratory with me. We used him as a positive control for carbon monoxide. As stupid as it is. They used me as a negative control because I was a runner. But we used him as a positive control, and he always had carbon monoxide in his blood. Now you would think that this is somebody can potentially be dead from this carbon monoxide. You would think he would be smart enough to see, oh, they're using me as a positive control, maybe I should stop smoking.
Yeah.
No, he's dead. He is dead. He's the guy that stabbed me. He was my friend that stabbed me. He was the Cajun guy that stabbed me in the stomach. He was my friend and he stabbed me in the stomach.
At least he stabbed you in the front, not the back.
I can't say what you stab,
I'm
how many
joking.
times you stab. Being a it's a vasoconstrictor as well. 1/3 of all smoking deaths are due to cardiovascular disease. 35,000 of these are from second-hand smoke. Bronchopulmonary diseases are far more prevalent among smokers than non-smokers. Emphysema, chronic bronchitis, COPD, of course, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. These individuals, people with COPD, the flexibility of their lungs and their rib cage has decreased to the point that they can barely breathe. That they have problems breathing. Children who live with smokers suffer from more asthma, more colds, and more bronchitis. 80 to 90% of all COPD deaths are due to smoking. And of course, you see these people, they have to blow oxygen into their lungs, pure oxygen into their lungs, and you'll see them walking around with their oxygen tanks.
Yeah.
And then you'll see them pull out their cannulas and smoke a cigarette and put their cannulas back in. Of course, they can't smoke their cigarette while they have the oxygen because oxygen is highly flammable.
Mhm.
Okay, but they'll pull that thing out and smoke a cigarette. Irritating as all get out.
That is.
That's stupid. Men who smoke are 22 times more likely to develop lung cancer than men who don't. Women who smoke are 12 times more likely to develop lung cancer than women who don't. 85% of men and 75% of women with lung cancer smoke. Women comprised only 26% of lung cancer deaths in 1979. In 2002, they had increased to 42.8% of the deaths. The black lung cause, oh, it's just a joke. Anyway, yeah, okay, so women are smoking now. Equality, that's equality, you know. We need gender equality in the United States. I don't know about the whole dying of lung cancer thing, but at least it's equality. About 15% of mothers smoke during pregnancy. Nicotine and the byproduct carbon monoxide change some of the positive properties in the blood. Carbon monoxide blocks oxygen transport, as we had said before. Nicotine makes platelets more sticky, increasing the possibility of a clot forming. Babies born to smokers have lower birth weight. They have a higher incidence of SIDS. Women who smoke during pregnancy are twice as likely to miscarry and have spontaneous abortions as non-smokers. Children whose mothers smoke during pregnancy have a 4 times greater chance of having ADHD. Once again, ADHD, is it real ADHD or is this just nicotine-induced ADHD?
Yeah.
They're more likely to have conduct disorder, they're more likely to be drug dependent, they're more likely to have asthma, chronic bronchitis, and chronic respiratory symptoms. So these kids are not as healthy as kids whose mothers didn't smoke. Smokeless tobacco can be as addictive as smoking because tobacco in smokeless tobacco forms contains more nicotine than smoked tobacco. People use more smokeless tobacco when they use. Smokeless tobacco has a higher pH, allowing it to pass into the capillaries more readily. 1 dip of smokeless tobacco delivers the same amount of nicotine as 3 to 4 cigarettes. At least the dipper is less likely to get lung cancer. That's true, they are, but they're more likely to get throat cancer. Gums are inflamed from use, causing more dental problems. They have a higher risk of oral cancer, pharyngeal cancer, esophageal cancer, cheek cancer, and gum cancer. That's not so bad. It's not.
You don't need your mouth for anything.
No, you don't need your mouth. Exactly. I told you about my friend that was a chewer, and he was a judge. That was the bizarre part. Anyway, he got cancer in his jaw, and they had to take out all of the muscles in this side of his face. So now he can't lift his chin up, and he talks out of one side of his mouth, which is always attractive for a judge. So he's sitting there, hearing the case and talking out of one side of his mouth. The problem with smokeless tobacco is that, especially snuff, they put, fiberglass in it, so that it'll cut your gums, so it'll
Oh,
get into
yeah.
your system faster.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think I've seen people use that. It's like a little package, right?
Right.
And it comes in a can.
Yeah, you can use those, or you can just take there's fiberglass in all the tobacco.
Okay.
So you just put it in there, and of course, it cuts your gums, these micro cuts, and it speeds the tobacco, or the nicotine into your system. Isn't that great? So they're giving you something, fiberglass. Fiberglass is not organic. You're putting this inorganic thing in your mouth to cut your gums up. And of course, that's why it causes so much cancer. Benefits of quitting smoking, quitting using tobacco 20 minutes after quitting, blood pressure and pulse rate drop, and feet and hands warm to normal temperatures. If you've ever been around a smoker, their extremities are always cold. Within 8 hours, the carbon monoxide level in the blood drops and oxygen levels increase, both to normal. Within 24 hours, the risk of sudden heart attack decreases. Within 48 hours, the nerve endings adjust to the absence of nicotine while the sense of taste and smell returns. This is why they eat more. Within 1 week, breathing improves and constricted blood vessels begin to relax. Within 2 to 12 weeks, circulation improves, lung function increases up to 30%, and the complexion begins looking healthy again. Whereas before, they look kind of gray. They look pale. Within 1 to 9 months, fatigue, coughing, sinus congestion, and shortness of breath decreases, and lungs increase their ability to handle mucus. Within 1 year, the risk of coronary heart disease has been cut in half. Within 5 years, the heart disease rate has become that of a non-smoker. Within 10 years, the lung cancer rate drops to just above that of a non-smoker. Within 10 to 15 years, the disease rate has returned to that of a non-smoker. Okay.
So to feel normal again, you have to stop smoking for 15 years.
You have to stop smoking for 15 years. Yes. Isn't that great?
Mm-hmm.
So you can return to normal. It just takes you 15 years.
If you live that long.
If you live that long, exactly. Right, where's the death? Oh, here it is. If you can survive 10 years, you're good to go. It's the cancer that kills you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the lung cancer that kills you. Anyway, so you can stop smoking and you'll be healthier, but you've already cut 10 years off your life, depending on how long you've been smoking, of course. Yeah. Well, anyway, dead's dead, I guess. Sorry about that. You don't smoke, so you don't have to worry.
Yes, I do not smoke.
We do stupid things because of our friends. Luckily, I don't have any friends, so I don't do stupid things just to make them happy. The next chapter is about opiates and opioids. There we go, chapter 4. And sedative hypnotics. There we go. Okay, let me see how much time I've got. What, 10 minutes? 8 minutes. Depressants depress the activity of the central nervous system. They sedate, they cause muscles to relax, they may depress inhibitions, they may depress your emotions, they may depress your impulses. They mimic the natural inhibitory neurotransmitters, endorphins, enkephalins, and GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid. 3 major classes of downers: opiates, opioids, sedative, hypnotics, and alcohol. Alcohol is a depressant. 4 minor classes of depressants: skeletal muscle relaxants, antihistamines, over-the-counter depressants, and look-alike depressants. Now, the look-alike depressants have been outlawed pretty much in the United States, so we don't really have to think about those. Opiates, opioids include opium, morphine, codeine, hydrocodone. Another name for hydrocodone is Vicodin, oxycodone, OxyContin, methadone, and heroin. Originally, it was developed as painkillers, cough suppressants, and diarrhea treatments. It really slows your guts down, which keeps you from having diarrhea. Sedative hypnotics are synthetic chemicals developed to treat anxiety and insomnia. Naprobamate, Milltown. This was really serious back in the 50s and 60s. There were a lot of women that were overly anxious, and they were treating anxiety with, or panic attacks with Milltown. So you had a lot of women taking this stuff. Milltown, yeah. So when, what was it, the Rolling Stones, they sing a song about Mother's Little Helper. This was real popular over in Europe. And that was England, of course, and it was Milltown that they were talking about. Phenobarbital, Seconal, Doradin, methaqualone, which is another name for it is Quaaludes. Flunatraxapam, which is roofies, Rohypnol. GHB, which is also a date rape drug. Benzodiazepines, Xanax, and Valium. Valium used to be the most popular drug in the world. Valium was, back in the 50s and 60s. Then when they invented Prozac became the most popular drug in the world. And right now it's Viagra. You wouldn't think there would be that many guys with erectile dysfunction. Women can't, I mean, it doesn't do anything to women. So why in the world would they take it? So, but it's still the most popular drug in the world. There's more Viagra being sold than any other drug in the world. Think about that. All those poor guys with erectile dysfunction.
It's weird.
We'll figure it out. There's got to be a reason why it's the most popular drug in the world. And it made sense that Valium was the most popular drug in the world because that's an anti-anxiety drug. It made sense that Prozac was the most popular drug in the world. It's an antidepressant. Why Viagra? There's got to be a reason for it.
Yeah.
And it can't just be guys with erectile dysfunction. It's got to be, they must be using it for something else. It's like kids are taking it so that they can have prolonged erections or something. I don't know. I don't know what kids are doing these days. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
That's weird. I don't know.
Well, the problem is, if a kid takes Viagra and has a prolonged erection, that's okay, but now all of a sudden, he loses the ability to have natural erections.
True.
Yeah.
And then he's gonna really need the drug.
Yeah, so he just unscrewed himself for the rest of his life.
Yeah, that's dumb.
It's stupid. Alcohol, the natural byproduct of fermentation process of plant sugars or starches. This is the oldest psychoactive substance used by humans. Alcohol is the world's second most destructive drug after tobacco, but tobacco, of course, is number one. Thank you very much, Native Americans, for giving the world tobacco.
You're welcome.
You're so sweet. It was so nice of you.
That's the plan.
Kill us all off with tobacco. We'll pay you back.
I'll
We'll
show
give
you.
you-
You're on camera, huh?
We'll give you alcohol.
Told everybody. We'll take that.
Think of all the white people that we've killed with tobacco. Skeletal muscle relaxants, synthetically developed central nervous system depressants that target the area of the brain responsible for muscle coordination and activity. Soma, Paraffin Forte, Flexeril, Lyrosol, and Robaxin. Of these, well, Soma, this is one that I've very rarely seen.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Yeah, Paraffin Forte is fairly common, Flexeril, Robaxin, and Soma are fairly common. Antihistamines are found in cold and allergy medications to block the neurotransmitter histamine. It's synthetic drugs used to treat allergic reactions, prevent ulcers, prevent shock, prevent rashes, prevent motion sickness, and prevent symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Over-the-counter depressants, sleep aids or sedatives, Nitol, Sleepies, Sominex. Active ingredients are scopolamine, the true serum, scopolamine, antihistamines, bromide derivatives, and alcohol, of course. Yeah, okay, we try to stay away from sleep aids. Lookalike depressants are rarely seen today. They're, like I said, they're against, they are illegal in the United States. We don't use them because we had enough trouble with Milltown. We had enough trouble with, what am I thinking of? Secano and the rest of them. So we don't really use them very much anymore. Why don't we stop here and we'll pick this up next time, since I've got